before coming into the practical aspect of the ground level, there are NGOs. There are no support. They are roaming around to where could I get some support? I'm ready to do. But just before the government aspect, we mentioned the tax. Would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and observations and a couple of suggestions as well. As we all know, that there's so much to be done in this country to pick up the overall quality of life. And there's so much of disparity, education levels, exposure levels, access to health, access to education. So we are all aware of the wide disparity. And rightfully, the CSR money is also supposed to bridge those causes, either through government or through the NGOs. And having been on the district level, seen how things work at the district level, and having got elected thrice from my area. So what I had noticed then was, it was introduced during our government's period. So since, everybody wanted that whatever little money they wanted, so the collector became the trustee of the money. So it was at the whims and fancies of the collector where the money would go. And these are my observations, what has happened on the ground level. And let's say there was an industry in an area X. It tended to fund schools, other things around that area. So it became very limited to that area. From their perspective, they're right. And like one of you have said, one organization or one school benefited from a number of industries from the same area. So, this was my observation, what was happening, And of course, it depended on the collector how effectively this money was to be spent. And so my proposition at that time, which I don't think anybody bothered to look into it, because, what happens is we know how effectively or ineffectively government resources are spent. It is the same with whatever money corporates are giving. So it's important to ensure that they're effectively spent. A few companies have picked worthy causes and they've gone after it. Okay. So that's a different approach. So my suggestion at that point of time was, there's a lot of, you guys have rightfully observed, NGOs don't know, they're passionate about it, but they don't know how to go about it. Similarly, there's a lot of well-meaning government schemes which don't get implemented effectively. So I was of the opinion that instead of the money, apart from the money, corporates should get involved in let's say you take up the cost of education. A company takes up the cost of education. It works with the district education officials to see how effectively either the government money or the CSR money is being spent. Otherwise, it would end up in furniture, infrastructure is all good. But at the end of the day, how, what are the learning outcomes is the measure. So I felt that corporates should also, the best way is collectively, you take up one cause every year. Let's say you take up the cause of how well the medical facilities are being rolled out in the district, either through government resources or other resources. Make an assessment because you're much more objective in your study and give suggestions for improvement. That was my take on it.
No, brilliant. I think, to your leaf, to your point, I think you've taken the point that I wanted to build in. We're a 4 trillion economy, right? And a 4 or 5 billion spending, I think is really somebody looking at the pie and a small peanut being thrown out of it. So for me, one step behind, I would look at it saying, when we are such a big economy, right, we're spending, I think the corporate business needs to be a more responsible business than looking at a contribution at the end of the year of a 2% charity, which they're obliged to do. If this corporate, overall, if they started with a responsible business, and we've got a wide array. So for example, the whole fundamental of the business, if you look at it, is inclined towards profit making. The central role of a CFO has been to save tax. If one was to relook at the whole role of how we've defined every role, and if everyone was started to look at responsible business and in their business, start looking at how they could contribute and make a great alliance in the whole economy, I think that will be a differentiator. I can give certain cases an example. We're one of the largest hospital chains in the country. You're one of the largest banks in the country, one of the largest technology countries. If banks were responsible for how many of the below the poverty index have you employed? What's been your employment ratio? How much of lending have you done to unsecured population? If those are the parameters we started measuring, then contributing to 2% of the economy, I think there'll be a lot of shift in the way we do responsible business. I mean, PepsiCo is a great example. When Indira Nooyi took the helm of PepsiCo, one of the things she said is, for every liter that I extract, I'm going to give back to society 2 liters. That, I think, is the most responsible way for doing business. So if every corporation started looking at that model, we've tried to do that in our own, healthcare business, which can impact more larger way. I think that's going to be more responsible in the way we operate in the society than looking at end of the year. I do all nefarious activities all through the year. I'm all talking about EBITDA bumping throughout in my boardroom. And then end of the year, I go and give a 2% contribution, which I've actually taken 20% from the society and give back 2%. So I think if you flip that equation on corporations and how responsible they can be, I think there's going to be a large shift in CSR, or you don't want to call CSR also. It's contribution to economy, equality.
I think there are multiple perspectives to it, and I don't think things are as easy or straightforward as we are talking, right? First of all, 35,000 crore in the larger Indian context, and as you mentioned, it just it's not even a change, right? Yeah, that's it, right? So that's one. So I think whatever as a corporate we are spending, I think it is it is very, very small compared to the overall what country needs. And I'm sure government, central or state, anyways, are doing their part. Now, without getting into it, now each of the organization, in my view, again, I mean, I may have a limited view here, that companies which are, let's say, centered in the larger cities, I think things are little bit more responsible. And that is where some of the problem of duplicity, saying that same agency, same school getting multiple funding. And companies are generally doing. Now, there also I see, two different trends. The companies which are still founder driven, and founder has a lot of passion about, okay, I mean, let's say, coming from the same region, I have to also give back to the society, I have to develop. I think the activities are a lot more responsible, going directly to the last mile and making a difference, be it education, be it surgery, be it health, be it training teachers, multiple things happening. And I come from science and I know what is happening. Maybe you also will know, Mr. Reddy. So I think that is there. But wherever it is left to the management and it is more professional management, I think they are counting more busy, the PAT margin or EBITDA margin or EBIT margin at the end of the quarter and how much my share is going up. But even in those situations, I think it is important to, really figure out, a passionate guy who is, built upon or thinks in the same line, how I can make a difference to the society. I think even at those places, a lot of these cases of duplicity and all of that can be taken care if the guy is passionate in, making an actual difference on the ground. Okay, and then talking about the initial point, talking about are we just talking stories or actually making impact? I think both are important, right? Now the thing is, are you writing or creating story to just for optics or to actually creating a spark? Right? Because each company, depending on the size of company, can only do so much, right? And but when you create story and do little more, let's say around what is happening. For example, let's say if you go to Gachibowli, you will see signed foundation in the, written on the outside board. Now, does it advertising of Scient? Probably it is other way. If Scient, some company or Richa may take an inspiration, like also have an HSBC board there, or maybe on some other school or some other places, be it a slum or be it anywhere. So I think a lot of things are happening on the ground, but I think how do we really disseminate to the larger country rather than just being focused on the cities? I think also we should look.
I just want to add on what you were saying, sir, that when the collector has the ownership, then the money just goes around the whole thought process of where the person wants to do that. I actually want to at this point that, see, wherever the economy of the cities are very high, like take an example of metros and now tier 1 cities, Hyderabad, Bangalore, I think the funding available is a lot and the support is always given on the surrounding of that. And I was just thinking about where I grew up in my life, very small town, and that's a whole textile hub of country also. There is so much money, but nobody even talk about CSR there. The businessman has no idea. What are you talking? They just give 2% or whatever the mandate is. But the whole concept, I think the impact has to start happening not only in big city, but those small, which are actually generating a lot of money. You take an example of small towns in Punjab and Haryana, they are generating so much money. I'm from that side, so I'm lesser aware of the southern side of the cities. And they are generating so much of money. And the knowledge, the impact, and in fact, the work done is also very minimalistic. I think that is something, probably some push needs to be done to create more.
I maybe just picking on what you just said. I mean, I come from Bihar, it's completely other way, right? A very, very prosperous industrial state versus, it's just agriculture, right? And I don't think I even heard or hear this CSR word, in my back hometown. And therefore, like, let's say whatever people can do in Ludhiana or Chandigarh or so, can they also look at, going to their, places where they have maybe a large warehouse or large agency, and there also they can do something, right? But on a contradiction, Punjab is one of the state where, too much of free, right? So, if so much of money is there and being spent, then, why government has to give so much of free? I mean, anyway, that's on a side conversation, but yeah, I think how do we, take it forward where, place is not as industrialized, as many other cities or the larger industrial area, right? So I think that's important.
Yeah, look, I mean, again, I can speak for this public company, which is about 1,000 crore market cap, right? We had zero full-time resources, right? Essentially, as an independent director on the board, because I took the initiative, they said, okay, you figure it out. So luckily, it took me a couple of months to hire a consultant and then look at the projects around the factory. As you were saying, this is kind of the typical, we picked a couple of things, like restoration of a well, and, and it worked out well. I mean, because somebody just, as an independent director, just took the lead and just did it because I had some time on my hands. But they were not interested in, appointing even 25% of somebody's resource. And that to 1,000 crore company. I mean, let alone anything smaller than that, right? So this is the biggest challenge. Internally, there is not much buy-in even though the CEO is like, look, we obviously want to do the best job we can, and we produce this wonderful report and, a board is satisfied and, obviously anybody looking at it will be satisfied, but that's kind of the extent of it, right? And the problem, as you know, is the further away we go from urban, the more leakage there is in the system, right? Which presents ultimately for somebody like an urban-based company more risk than anything, right? Because somebody will leak something and then it'll come back to you only in a negative way. There's just no upside to it, right? So, that's the reason why the default is United Way or some, big NGO. Prajwala is the other one, in Hyderabad, very good causes, but you just want to right, wash your hands off it. That's the lip service part of the equation, right? But I do think that internally, at least from an employee group or something, if you create a kind of a community which is interested and will take the lead, they will volunteer a little bit of their time to do it, because there's so much more, fun in actually, being part of, a school project where you're going there and you're volunteering, you're doing something along with the time you're using money to leverage the impact of your time, that kind of thing, I think. But that's still, I think we're at an early stage in India too.